We've talked to you regularly in the lead up to this, but I think since our last conversation, we have two sets of retaliatory tariffs from Canada and, of course, the tariffs from the United States. So tens of billions of dollars affected with more to come. I thought we should check in with you. How are you doing and how's your level of concern for the community?
Well, since we last spoke, it's much higher. This is like being on a merry-go-round in an insane asylum. As a border city, we're feeling it already, the pain. The bridge traffic between Sarnia, Point Edward, and Port Huron is down dramatically, and I understand it's the same other border crossings.
It's down.
Canadians
it's down. People aren't going back and forth.
And here, you can be over there in half an hour, 10 minutes and back. They aren't doing it. And I think this is great because it's not an organized political boycott by politicians. It's ordinary Canadians saying, we're not going, we're not spending our money there. And it's dramatic what I'm hearing back. I will say, I think today is D-Day. Ford has set up this meeting today along with LeBlanc in Washington. And if we get more of the same rhetoric we're seeing in the last 24 hours and the same pushback and the same lack of disrespect, which has been key all through this, I think we need to go back and push back hard. And Heather, one of the things I hear repeatedly from other politicians is it's not the American people, it's the administration, the Trump administration. I've moved beyond that. There are 77 million Americans that voted for Trump. We need to hit back and hit back hard. And we also need to be prepared. I know in my own community, I'm speaking about an hour on this, it's going to be painful. And it's going to be tough. And it's going to be a lot more than, booing a national anthem or, buying the right type of ketchup. It's going to be very painful for us, but we have to do it. We just can't have this torture.
I want to come back to the meeting in a second because you've raised it, and I wanted to get your read on expectations. But since you mentioned the pain, I was talking about some of the things in Sarnia's economy, the oil refineries, the chemical production, the agriculture around. What is directly affected by the tariffs and the counter tariffs in place so far?
So far, it's hard to tell what is actually impacted because it keeps on changing. The sands keep on shifting. I will say this, my biggest concern as mayor of this energy hub for Eastern Canada is that Line 5 comes from Alberta through the U.S. into Sarnia. We have a major pipeline from Pennsylvania that comes into Sarnia to supply the industry here. And if there's retaliation on this side, there's going to be retaliation there. And that would cost thousands of jobs almost instantly. So that is the big fear, because if we're going to go to war, we better be prepared for it. And I know in my own community, we're willing to do our part, but we want all Canadians to be part of the pain.
And in terms of when you talk about border city, you're part of a coalition of Great Lakes mayors, Great Lakes cities mayors. I'm just wondering, so that's Canadian and U.S. membership. What are the dynamics of that group right now?
My own observation is from a call about a month ago, it's very, very tense. And I'm also hearing that. I met with someone yesterday who's involved in a Canadian-U.S. Tech group, and the same thing is happening. The Americans are saying to us, too bad. This is just the new reality. And how long do you take that before you say, well, that's fine, then we don't need to continue this relationship? I'm really concerned because Trump has targeted the money being spent in the Great Lakes on both sides to be eliminated. And that was doing environmental upgrades, environmental protection. And I see that happening. But there's a division now I see between the Canadian and American mayors. They're trying to protect their own political selves in their own communities because of the popularity still to some degree of Trump. And that's why I go back to my point earlier. We need to push back on those 77 million Americans and let them feel the pain of what they're doing to this great ally and great neighbor.
We had just a couple of minutes before you're coming on the air with us, Mayor Bradley, Hamilton's Mayor Andrea Horwath, whom you'll know well, talking about her concerns specifically for steel in her community, but talking about how long this could last and really worried about long-term damage and potentially even permanent damage. Is that something that you foresee for Sarnia?
Unfortunately, yes, at this point. But, this is going to be 4 years. This is the original part of what's going to happen. So we better be prepared for the 4 years and the pain. It's going to be like being at war, that all of a sudden there are all these things you can't afford or can't have, and we better get ready for that. I will say the one observation, because one of the great joys about being a mayor is the mayors are cooperating on the Canadian side, the Canadian Border Alliance, the Great Lakes Mayors Group that Andrea is part of, and I'm part of too. We are all together on this. But we need, in my view, and I'm speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for the other mayors, we need to push back. And if today's meeting doesn't work out and we get the same rhetoric as we've got before, then we need to act, and we need to act very quickly.
Okay. From that meeting, I mean, Ontario Premier Ford has been talking about raising the issue of an early return to the bargaining table for the review of USMCA or CUSMA. But really what Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc has said, and said to Power and Politics yesterday, he's looking for evening out the process, ending the disruption, the to and fro over yes, there are tariffs or no, they're not, that kind of an impact. Those are his expectations. For you, what do you think needs to come from what is key, obviously a key day in diplomacy today?
Well, Heather, at some point, anyone that's been involved in bargaining knows this. At some point, you walk from the table. I think we're getting close to that point. We do have an agreement in place. Maybe it should just stand till its expiry. But we can't keep on taking this economic terrorism directed at us and specifically trying to hurt us and hurt us and hurt us. So I think I'll wait to see what the outcome of the meeting is. I'm not optimistic based on what we've been hearing. However, we need to start upping our game then and not rolling over every time they do something and pulling back on these surcharges and these tariffs. We just can't do that. And they're loving it on the other side of the river at the political level.
Was that a conscious choice of vocabulary there, economic terrorism?
It's a phrase that is exactly what is happening here. It's economic terrorism right across this country, and it's going to hit every sector, every individual in Canada. And that's what it is. And it's sad to go from 6 months ago to where we are today. And God forbid where we'll be in 6 months from now. But we got to stand up and be strong. And yes, there's a lot of good people pushing back politically and in communities, but it's going to be a rough ride in the next 6 months for sure, just trying to hold our own. And a bully only understands pushing back. And that's exactly what we need to do at this point in time.